Yeah, I believe in you. I don't believe in lucky sevens. I'm not sure about my nest, but I know I believe in angels. I believe in happiness.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here this evening. And I just want to bring up our financial expert first, and he can tell you a little bit about what he does. So I'm not going to do the normal jib jab about my day. Here he is, J.C. Schweingruber of Vista Front Partners. Hey there.
Hey, everyone. How was your day, Elizabeth?
My day was crazy. My day started out at the doctor's office. I had to go from one doctor to the next, right? So a little bit of a time crunch, which, I've been relaxing a little bit after the Africa trip, just trying to get back into the swing of things. And this threw me into the swing of things. So I'm sitting in my car. I have the next appointment to go, and straight in front of me, in the middle of this tiny little parking lot, is a man on the phone, okay? But he's wearing jeggings. And when you want to give somebody the benefit of the doubt, I look up and I'm like, oh, he's wearing sweatpants. I don't know why my brain honed in on he's wearing jeggings. And he's standing, of course, right in front of my car, so I can't back out. And I'm in a Tesla. Normally, like you turn on the car and they'll hear something. No, you can't rev a Tesla. So I'm just sitting there patiently, and I'm like, if I honk the horn, I'm going to scare him. So what do I do? So I waited patiently, and the day just sort of went from there. And then my son, youngest son, he's 12 years old. He has what we call a fan club. There's about 3 girls in the neighborhood. They are, I don't know, about 2 years younger than him. So I'd say 5th and 6th grade, and he's in 7th grade, right? So he's like, yeah, he's the it guy for these girls. Past couple of years, they've been coming in and they'll ding dong ditch him all day long. So they ring the doorbell, they run away, they're across the street behind the bushes. He opens the door, he hears, and then they go running, right? Because they want him to chase them up the hill because they live down the street. Well, he just casually put it out there. He's like, hey, Mom, you know those inflatable costumes that you have? And I said, yeah. And I'm like, oh God, what do I have? What do I have? I knew I had like a grizzly bear and a rooster, and I wasn't sure what else I had. I got them on sale last year. Thought it would be funny. So I just ordered a bunch of them. So he's like, yeah, I put, that chicken one. I'm like, oh God, what did you do? Dressed as an inflatable rooster. What did you do? He's like, yeah, my fan club came by, so I chased him. And I'm like, in an inflatable rooster costume? He's like, yeah. I said, did you tape it? He goes, no.
Those girls will be telling their kids about that crap one day. That's funny. Actually, the day I got chased by an inflatable rooster, let me tell you.
Yep, that's my life.
That is hilarious. So I got a question. So you're sitting there in your Tesla. This guy's behind you. You don't want to honk the horn and scare him, but I know you're a Jersey girl. Like, at what point does the Jersey come out? You're like, hey, yo. You start talking like Tony Soprano to him. What does it take?
Not very long to myself in my car, but I've been in the South long enough to have more of that passive aggressive politeness just sort of drilled into me. And it's more of like we can use language on the show. It's more of like holding the steering wheel going, are you fucking kidding me right now? Are you kidding me right now? In your jeggings, like, you don't even have a package in jeggings. Are you kidding me? So,
you said that. You actually said that.
Yeah. So, it was sort of like abusing him behind glass.
Wow. Now, did you record that?
No. No, but the conversations to myself in the car get very colorful at times. I'm realizing. How was your day?
Yes, it's it's been a good day. I didn't have anybody standing behind my car or anything, and I didn't hit any wild animals. I did have some really interesting thing happen this week. I go to bed one night and I'm laying there, and I hear this crazy howl, and like from the wooded area near my house, and I'm like, "What in the world is that?" And then it again, and then I thought, okay. And when I say howl, people think around like wolves or coyotes. There's no wolves here, but like coyotes, yeah. But no, I thought probably it was a bear because that didn't sound like a coyote. If it was a coyote, it was a coyote getting eaten. All the dogs in the neighborhood just started going off, and then all of a sudden they all shut up. And I'm like, I hope a bear is not walking through the neighborhood, but it happens. I mean, occasionally you see a dead brown or black bear. Maybe a trucker has hit it or something like that, and you feel. I don't know if you feel worse for the bear or the truck, because these things can get like 300-400 pounds. Now, where my sister lives near South Holston Lake, they occasionally spot one going through their neighborhood too at night. So you kind of have to be careful with your pets, and it's a really nice neighborhood because there's deer walking everywhere, and it's of course you're near a body of water. But yeah, I was like, is that the Hound of the Baskervilles? What is going on in the woods back here? Is there like a Bigfoot sighting or something? I didn't know. But honestly, I started thinking about it, and I'd heard this sound before. And do you remember that movie called An American Werewolf in London?
Vaguely.
Well, when they were going across the moors, this guttural howling off in the distance. That's sort of what it sounded like. I'm like, that's not normal. So maybe it was a mixture of two. I don't know. But anyway, weird sound. But that's the only thing I could think of that it could have been.
Did you go outside to investigate?
Heck no. No.
Coyotes can sometimes sound like a mixture of, maybe a wolf howl, but children screaming and screeching and.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, yeah. Oh, they're so loud.
Maybe, I guess anything's possible unless I see what it was. But now the first time I heard it, it was a few months back, and I did go outside because I could hear it like off in the distance. But like this time, it just sounded like it was a little closer to the neighborhood than not. And I don't want to walk outside in the middle of some bear like standing next to my porch. I don't want that. That might not end well. That would be a bad day.
Yeah, I would. There's been a lot of videos going around where people are like throwing food at wild animals, and then it's all shock and awe that they eat them. The animal eats the person. You get. I mean, I saw this one video. I don't know why it's when I'm trying to go to sleep, but I've had this really bad habit because you're just laying in bed, you're alone, you don't have anybody to talk to, so you wind up scrolling, right? So I was scrolling. There's this guy out fishing. They were ocean fishing, and he goes to pick up a shark out of the water, and the shark grabs onto his finger, does a roll, which I didn't know sharks roll. Did a roll and took the finger right off, and he's like, "Oh, I lost my finger," and I'm like, "Okay, first of all." That's your reaction? It's like, I lost my pinky finger. And secondly, why would you try to pick up a shark that's in the water? Why? I mean,
I've seen Jaws enough to know, like, I don't want to get in the ocean over my hips. I'm going to wade back in. I don't know. That's just insane. But I've seen a lot of those videos too, where like people are feeding it wild animals. No, don't even do that. Not even deer, as pretty as those things are. Because when the rut season, mating season comes around, and they're in rut. It's like they will attack you, especially if they have one of their fawns nearby. They will attack you, and I've seen plenty of videos of that too.
I didn't know that until I was always a street runner. I jog tons of miles every day. And I was running out of my neighborhood. It was during the day, didn't think anything of it. And I saw that there was this buck and a couple of female deer around him on somebody's yard, like up in the yard. And I'm on the street. So we weren't even very close to each other. But I'm approaching, and all of a sudden I hear this hissing. And I'm like, oh, crap. So I went the other way to just get away. Like I didn't know what they would do. And of course, looked it up later and I'm like, oh my God, they really do get aggressive. They're such stupid animals. And it seems like people are 50-50. If you're a gardener like I am, or you plant flowers, you like greenery around your house, you really don't like deer. But it seems
No.
if you don't do any of those things, oh my God, deer are just so gorgeous. They're so wonderful. People put deer corn out, and it's like, oh, come on. I mean,
Yeah, they got to stop that. And my sister, like they'll eat her flowers and plants that she puts out. And
mhm.
it's so annoying. And then of course you have any gardening, you have to put tall fencing up, and just to kind of keep things out. But yeah, they are annoying and they can be a little dangerous. They're pretty to look at. Um, Last year I hit one with my car. That was
Oh,
oh yeah, and my Envoy darted out right in front of me. Thankfully I was going really slow because it was a very foggy night, it was rainy,
uh-huh.
and I slowed down enough when I saw it like just dart out into the road. And there was nobody thankfully on the 4 lane next to me, so I swerved over and it went into the side of my car, not like in front. So, but it did knock the bumper. It broke the bracket of the bumper. Front bumper was hanging down, and I had to go get all that repaired. And of course, you don't want to turn that into insurance, right? Because but the guy at the garage that I know, he said like most of their stuff is like deer strikes because there's much fewer hunters now than there
Mhm.
used to be years ago, and they're just way out of control population. So not a
Wow.
day goes by I can't drive out of my neighborhood and up the 4 lane here and see a handful of them on the side of the roads grazing.
Wow. Speaking about animals, did you know that today is National Dog Day?
Did you spoil your boxers?
I spoil them every day. They're boxers. If you don't spoil them, they just come over and look at you sad. And I have one with a lazy eye, so they look like wonky eyed sad. And then you feel really bad. So, yeah, you have to spoil boxers. But today's National Dog Day. So, since we're talking about animals, I found something really cool. I'm going to share it to the screen. So, this is an app, and I'm trying to understand it. So, I'm just going to read part of the article to you guys. But this is Woofz, WOOFZ, dog training, and it's an app. And it says, in celebration to National Dog Day on Monday, one company has launched a nationwide search in the United States to hire someone for what it says is the dream job for dog parents. Woofs, a puppy and dog training app, is looking for a chief hotel inspector to travel with his or her own canine companion, stay at different hotels, and rate them based on their pet friendliness. How
Wow, okay.
cool is that?
That would be a cool job.
I wonder how many applicants they got.
I don't know, probably a ton.
Probably a ton.
But I wonder how many they have to turn away. Because like, what if you show up? It's like me and my Great Dane would like to stay here. It's like really, you rode that animal in here. Like you can't. We're not giving the dog an extra bed. Come on, man.
There's got to be some sort of limitations of like how well trained your dog. There has to be something, but I thought that was pretty cool. I mean, I actually contemplated signing up for that. I'm like, yeah, I got 2 mid-sized dogs. They probably like that. But then I stopped and I'm like, oh my gosh, you think about how many people own an animal that they absolutely love. They had to get tons of applicants. And then, speaking about dogs, let's go over to cats. This is one of those things where I said that, I have very colorful conversations with myself in the car. I was driving to my next location. I look over and there's this big building and it's marked. I'm trying to remember the exact name, but it was like Cat Emergency Center or Cat Hospital or something like that. It was just for felines.
Okay.
And I'm like, hold up. Do cats really need all that much care? Now I know, yeah, sure, cats get urinary infections. Cats can be bitten or hit by cars, just like a dog could. But there aren't really many dogs out there that are just feral dogs. Where in the cat population, you
Tons of them.
Yeah, there's tons of just feral cats and they roam and do whatever they're going to do. And there's some of them that are domesticated. It just struck me funny that there's a whole building dedicated to just cat care. Am I
Huh.
jaded? Am I like dog bias?
Uh, I don't know. Maybe are there any like just dog? There's like doggy daycare centers, right? So
Yeah,
I've never seen a daycare center, but
yeah.
you know, loves cats probably left that in their will, and like their insurance policies, and like they half their estate to go set this hospital up. Had to.
I, I have no idea, but you know what? For me to have a little bit of a beef with the cat care center, it's appropriate for National Dog Day. And doggy daycare, I had a friend of mine who she took both of her dogs to doggy daycare every day. And I thought, how pretentious. Like, who would do that? Well, I'll tell you who does that. I do that now because I have a hyperactive boxer puppy that's pissing off the older boxer. And the older boxer is just like an old man, like, knock it off. He's constantly just pushing him. And so now the older boxer is jealous and he's petty. And he's trying to tell the puppy that, you're not allowed on the deck. This is my deck. Like, no, you're not allowed to touch that toy. It's my toy. And I mean, he rang the bells because I have them bell trained to ring the bells for when they have to go out. Because boxers are not very vocal. They don't bark a lot. They're pretty mellow, calm dogs, except for this one puppy. So the puppy rang the bells because he had to go out. Well, he got growled at. And, the older one like sits on top of him. I don't know why that's a thing. And and so now apparently those are his bells and he should not ring his bells. And he's a petty, possessive, jealous dog. And it's a May birthday, so he's a Taurus dog. I get it. The other one is Scorpio, and I'm like, oh God. So
Wow.
Yeah. Lot going on.
Doggy drama. They should have their own doggy soap operas they watch.
It would be better than some of those, what are they called? The Spanish soap operas.
Oh,
It would be better than that because they're constantly like, they're just big emotions going on.
watching some Telemundo, have you?
Telemundo, yes. Yes. But speaking about big emotions, let's talk for just a second about this whole election drama that's going on. It seems like there was all this hype. Kamala. She's so great. She's my queen. I'm with her. Is kind of getting a little quiet. After the DNC is finished, it was like a cold shower on her.
You're not feeling the joy?
Not feeling the joy. No.
Yeah, I think it's kind of I think RFK Jr. probably took some wind out of the sails. That was, I think, historically that was bigger than most people think. When a Democrat and a Republican are like getting together.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of people want to see. And you got a lot of like anger and hate from the other convention. And the fact that she's not done an interview and her economic policy like filtering out a little bit at a time is so not good. Like, especially the one thing that scares me, like, we talked a little bit about it, but like that taxing unrealized capital gains.
Oh my God.
You'll kill innovation in half the stock market if she does. Literally, I'm not just figuratively saying that. But anybody that's a homeowner, imagine having your house and the value of your house goes up 25%. Now, you may not value your house that, but the local governments do, right? They come around and assess the value of your home. So if your value of your home goes up and you're not moving, you're not selling, but now all of a sudden you're on the hook for a 25% tax on that gain, unrealized gain. You haven't even sold your house, haven't seen a dime, and you have to pay a tax on that money based on the value. Now, what if it goes down in value in the next 3 or 4 years back to where it was? They're not going to reimburse you.
Right.
But
exactly.
You're just so anybody that even owns a home, and then they're going to give a $25,000 tax credit to young people and migrants. This is a big part of it. Migrants, $25,000 tax credit. Well, who is paying for that? Like that's going to drive, because if they're going to give them a $25,000 tax credit, then the home sellers are just going to raise the price of the home by $25,000. I mean, this is the way supply and demand works. I mean, costs get passed along. So they're just going to raise the value of the homes, and no one's really going to save anything. You're just subsidizing something that's not going to work. And we've seen how subsidies have worked countless times all through our country, and it just doesn't work. So
Well,
it's
I'll tell you what, I mean, with the unrealized tax, the first thing I do before it was actually put into law would be to sell my home and go rent something. I mean, why
Yeah.
would you buy anything ever again? That's ridiculous, because the home values, they fluctuate.
Yeah.
So quickly they fluctuate. So you just sit there and you hope that they catch it on a low. Like it's crazy.
So you mentioned something that's kind of subtle, and but this is something people need to understand. If you have a home and you don't want to get stuck with all those costs, anyway, right? That's phantom tax, basically. You're going to sell your home and you're going to rent. So you're not going to own property. Now, that is one of the tenets of a communist manifesto. Marx and Engels wrote that. So those types of policies, and people don't realize this, and people are smarter, they probably realize this. These are policies that were enacted when the Soviet Union became the Soviet Union. Things in China, communist China, Venezuela, for a long time in Argentina, when these governments were playing around with socialism and communism, and those are the tenets, and they put those policies in there so people wouldn't own anything. If you don't own anything, you don't have power over anything. So that was one of the basic premises of our country, is that you can own property, you can own things, right? So ownership and having the right to start your own business, these types of things are all parts of capitalism. And that is what a lot of these policies are to push people away from. It's very subtle, and no one wants to say, hey, these are Marxist policies. But yeah, about a handful of those that they've already talked about are sort of communist policies.
Yeah. This election's going to be very interesting. I see what you're saying. Going back to what you were beginning to say about Kennedy dropping out and backing Trump. Man, it's just tough times. It is tough times. And, internationally, it seems like whenever we're politically weak here, politics are just wonky all over the world. And you and I were talking about free speech. And, this kind of piggybacks off of a lesson that I taught my kids when we were in Africa. We had walked into an airport, and there were signs behind the agents where you check in for your flight and you check your bags and stuff. And those signs were very clearly saying, watch what you say. If you say something that insinuates a threat, you are subject to imprisonment. And, I was explaining to the kids what that meant. I said, you don't walk up and say something, oh, it's just a joke, or, it's just a joke. It's just a joke. No, there's no joking in a lot of countries, because you don't have freedom of speech. So you can't be like, oh, haha, that one's so heavy because that's the one I keep my bombs in. No, they will throw you in a jail and you're done. And then it's countries battling to try to get you out. I mean, we just saw what happened in Russia with, although she happened to have, contraband and marijuana on her that was not allowed, but the basketball player that was in prison in Russia for 3 years before we got her out? She was in there for quite a while.
I was a little over 18 months. It was a long time.
Yeah, yes. Do you remember her name? Brittany Griner. And
Griner.
Brittany just came out and she's like, yeah, I'm not voting for Biden. And, she had an interesting article come out a few months ago talking about her experience and how it changed her and how she sees this country differently. And well, duh. I mean, we just have very unique freedoms that if you don't covet those freedoms and protect those freedoms, you become a lot of these other countries. But you were mentioning about the war and the attack on freedom of speech in Europe. What are you seeing?
Well, the guy who runs the Telegraph was arrested in France,
Mhm.
and see, there was another arrest that went on, and this was from a guy they arrested him on charges of like human trafficking, him and his brother, and I forget the guy's name because they try to associate him with like right wing causes, like extreme right wing stuff. But I don't know enough about the guy about that. But he has been arrested so many times for things he has said or tweeted in other countries that it's just like, if you're an American citizen now and you tweet out something and you go to another country and they've reviewed your tweets and they don't like it, they reserve the right to arrest you. I mean, this is where we're heading in France and unfortunately the UK, because not long ago, not only freedom of speech, but freedom of thought. This was about a year or two ago. There was a lady who was standing across the street from an abortion clinic in London. I think it was London, but it was in the UK. And the police approached her. She was just being silent. And regardless of what your views are on this issue, on the whole abortion thing, she was just sitting there in silence. And the cops asked her what she was doing. She said, "I'm just standing here." And the cop said, "Are you praying?" And she said, "Yes, silently, I'm praying." Well, that was a thought crime because you're not supposed to pray around one of those centers because your freedom of speech is not. You can't go be across the street and pray for these people out loud. So she was arrested and in prison and went to trial. I don't know how the trial turned out. I never really followed him, but I did see enough that I needed to see that she was arrested for admitting what she was thinking, and two officers arrested her. So yeah, we are really lucky. So to be where we're at and can say the things we can say, whether the answer, if you don't like what somebody's saying, you don't limit somebody's speech, you give more speech. That's the answer to things. And people need to stop living in the bubble and not talking to each other. Talk to each other, debate, discuss, be rational and reasonable. But we have, unfortunately, too many people, I think because of social media a lot, that sort of live in their bubble. And, if you don't agree with me on everything, then I'm going to unfriend you,
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of a sad situation. But that's why we need to guard our freedoms so hard here, because this is the last place for it. And then, like you said, when we have strong leadership, then that sort of courage kind of bubbles up around the world to other populations and other governments and leaders over there to allow freedom of speech. And right, when you have a vacuum of weakness, you see a lot of crazy things like this happening.
I did not hear about that, and that just blows my mind. Thought crimes.
Yeah. I'll do it. And so anybody's welcome to go Google it and look it up if it hasn't been disappeared down the rabbit hole by now. But if I find the link, I'll look it up and I'll send it to you. Because it just blew my mind too. It was like, they just arrested this lady for a thought crime. That was insane. I mean, that's George Orwell's 1984.
That is. And we have so many people here in the United States that we've been raised to be able to think what we want, say what we want. As long as you're not deliberately saying that you're going to do X, Y, and Z, which could cause harm to others.
Right,
and as long as you're not doing that, you have a right to your opinion, and you can speak your opinion. You can have an opinion. And it's just, yeah, Aaron Poe is watching. He's saying it's disgusting what's happening in Europe right now. It is. And we don't want that to become our reality. So we need to stand firm on some of the values that created our society, to be able to have our opinion, speak our opinion, debate each other, be able to think and speak freely. It's such a virtue of this country that you really have to hold it true. And it's not just something that we can be frivolous with. And I think, that's kind of a hard point to project towards our younger people, even though they use it the most. And but they're not realizing that they use it the most. And, I'm a huge advocate of people leaving this country. Go leave this country. And even if you just visit a week, 2 weeks, or preferably for me, go live somewhere for a couple of months and then come back. And you're going to have a list of at least 5 to 10 items that you treasure about this country and living in this country. That is also a reason for why people rush our borders. Why do you think all these people are trying to rush into this country? Nobody's trying to rush into Venezuela. Nobody's trying to rush into China or North Korea or Russia. Nobody's trying to. Maybe there's a reason. I don't know.
The only people I know rushing into Mexico are drunk. So, there's that.
There is that. All right. So what happened in today's market? Tell us. Give us a little rundown.
Today was kind of a flat day. So not a whole lot of things. One thing I'm looking forward to this week is that stock that everybody talks about, NVIDIA, right? The AI chip, right? So they're going to be reporting earnings this week. So that's going to be a big thing. So I'll be on the lookout for that. But today really the market has been the volatility index since that 1,000-point drop that we talked about 3 weeks ago. The volatility has come down a lot. So we're back down to around like 15, 16 on the VIX, the VIX, the volatility index measurement, which is where I want to see it. So, but that being said, going into the fall, one thing I'm sort of expecting, and if it happens, then I sort of expect it. But if it doesn't, you're flexible. But I do expect another correction going into the fall. And by correction, I don't mean like a big 1,000-point day crash. People freaking out. So you might see a little bit of a steady decline in the market indexes around 5, 6, 7%, maybe something like that. But again, those are opportunities when you have those down days like that to add to your positions that you like. So that's sort of what I'm expecting a little bit going into the fall, just from certain analysts that I follow that make more sense about, I guess, the market kind of getting a little bit ahead of itself. And we bounced back really quickly after that big sell-off. So that, but we've held those levels. Gold is a record high now, about 4,500 an ounce. And so that's sort of where we're at right now. And I think sort of we'll might be a little bit more choppy going into the election itself. I guess some people get a little bit more nervous, but the market, if anybody's looking for like a prediction of the election, who knows how right it is, but the market seems to be acting as if they're expecting a Trump win. If they were expecting all this stuff that's leaking out of the Harris camp to win, the volatility would already be picking up. Now, it's not to say that it won't as we get a little closer. I think that'll be a part of it, because just a general nervousness about how it's going to happen on election night and things like that. Hopefully we don't have any shenanigans, and all that. But as we go into that, that's sort of what I'm looking at. So I'm going to hopefully, knock on wood, hopefully I'll have a little bit of a correction to take advantage of with cash I have for some clients, and I can move them in and get those that are long term. We can buy some good stuff and at a little cheaper price. That'd be kind of nice. But
I like. I like the philosophy that you've shared with us, where when the market takes a little bit of a downturn, everything's on sale. So because it will recover and it will come back. Now, we had a jobs report that came out. Can you tell us a little bit about how that affects the market? Because the jobs were not quite accurate in what they were telling us for the past couple of quarters.
Yeah. So the administration has been touting like something along the lines of 2.9 million jobs created, in the course of the year. And so the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS, you hear that BLS reports. Well, that stands for Bureau of Labor Statistics. They give their revised reports after the fact, so like after a quarter, after a month, you have a certain number of jobs. It's reported. And then what is reported by the government, and then what's reported by like ADP or something, those have been off for a long time. they haven't matched up. And people are like, well, why is one so far off than the other? And blah, blah, blah. I think a lot of that had to do with people returning back to work from COVID, and that they had that sort of lag. So you can explain that for a while. But after a while, you can't really explain that away. So this year, so this past week, there was a jobs report that came out that said that the government had overestimated the number of jobs by over 800,000. So 800,000 less jobs, almost a million less jobs than what they were reporting. And that is a huge miss. To miss by a margin of error like 3 to 5%, that's one thing, right? Mm-hmm. So, but when you're missing by 33% what the jobs created are, that tells me that there's maybe, I don't want to say corruption, but maybe gross incompetence on how they're counting these jobs and reporting these jobs, because that gives everybody the impression that the economy is a lot more stable than what it is. So when that report came out, because usually when a report comes out, the next month they give you the second reading, and the next month they give you the third reading, and those numbers in good times usually get revised up. But over the last 2 years, every month they get revised down and down and down. Every time they do a recalculation from like 2 months ago or 3 months ago, like for the quarter, it gets revised down. And so we've been seeing that for the last 2 years. And that's not surprising, because after all the bounce back of jobs after COVID, how many people have been sitting on the sideline where you can actually hire this many people? So that tells me a lot of it's migrant workers. So also part of the report, another, not that particular report, but another report that came out that I did not like, showed that of the jobs that were created, one out of every three went to migrant workers, not Americans. So again, how is that going to impact the revision going forward? Say next year, when we look back at 2024, like in say June of 2025, we start getting all these revisions from the previous year. Mm-hmm. Are we going to definitely not like what we're seeing? And I'm thinking that's probably going to be the case, because there's some other. So that just tells me that, one, the jobs picture is not as great as the Fed. Well, they probably know this already, but they were slow when it comes to raising rates to keep inflation at bay. And there were other things causing it other than just, that need to be done other than raising rates. But so they've probably broken something raising them at the pace that they did, instead of like, well, everything in hindsight, right? So I'll just keep my thought to myself on that. But I think they probably maybe went a little too far and hung on a little too long before they start cutting rates. Mm-hmm. But that's not going to solve necessarily all the inflation problem. I don't know if it will creep back in. But if we see government spending at the way that it's been going, that is definitely hurting those inflation numbers. But they have a job mandate to do too. So if you're starting to see the unemployment rate creep up over 5%, 6%, that's not good either. So who really knows what that rate is? Because I don't trust the number that they're reporting now. And so that just means the Fed's definitely going to be cutting in September. Mm-hmm. And they'll probably stick with that 25 basis points, but there's some that are out there saying you guys are like kind of behind the curve on the way down. You guys need to cut 50. And then, so who knows how fast they'll go, but we'll find out. But cutting rates again into a rate cutting environment helps a lot of companies, big mm-hmm. caps. And so that's good for the stock market. But if we're talking about Main Street, we're starting to see companies announce more layoffs. So we're seeing more job losses now. And it's not the thing that's in the forefront of the news, and the media will not put it in the forefront of the news until after the election, probably. But right. We're starting to see more layoffs that are announced, companies that are kind of sort of smaller companies closing the doors. People aren't getting the capital that they need. So these types of things are starting to happen. One of the other reports that I saw, and I don't know if this made the news, but this is part of one of those nerd reports that I read about customer or the way people spend their money. And we've seen 30% rise on average at groceries over the last 2 years.
30?
Yeah, or more. Right. So and they haven't come down. So that's still pissed a lot of people off. It's still hurting a lot of people in their wallet. And I mean, you know this with kids, and you try to buy healthier for your kids too. So I know that's tough. Like that's expensive. So one of the things that I noticed in these reports are like little subtle things, but you pay attention to, is our customers shopping down, lowering their standards of what they normally shop for. For example, are they going from like steak to like round steak, from filet mignon to round steak, or are they going from steak to hamburgers and chicken? The type of ground beef that I saw that was like sold, like the higher quality, like leaner meats, saw a significant drop in sales, and the higher fat, like the less lean hamburger meat that's cheaper, saw a market increase in sales. Shopping down. And not only that, they're like chicken sales have gone down. And one of the things that I look at is like the cheaper meats that have seen higher sales, like sausages, things like that. Those things that are cheaper to buy, but still have protein, those things are actually seeing a pretty good size increase. So shoppers at the grocery stores, not just the regular stores, but even through like Walmart grocers and all that stuff, are shopping down now across the board. So that tells you there's something economically on Main Street that's not as good as it was a year ago, or yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I was just looking up the U.S. companies. So we heard earlier in the year that there were some companies that were closing, but there's a new article that came out about Walmart, and that's what's concerning to me. Once you get into the bigger box stores, so this one, let's see, let me try to get it lined up. Oh, you know what? It's a web page. I don't think it will line up for you so I will just read it to you. I think I closed it. Anyway, it was Red Lobster, CVS, Walgreens, and we've heard about CVS and Walgreens. Some of these companies are closing in the state of California or in DC, in the areas where especially theft is anything under $1,000. I think in California now it's up to $950. If you steal up to $950, they'll just let you go. Like it just is what it is. So every day you can come into the store and lift $950 worth of goods out of a store and leave, and nobody's going to chase after you. Nobody's going to arrest you. It is what it is. So these stores are closing, and a lot of them are in California. But the article I read last week was about Walmart, and the overall statement was that they did not feel that the current economy can sustain them, really. So I was just looking at the report of stores that are closing, and Macy's, Rue 21, those, Macy's is pretty much, that's an anchor store for a lot of the malls. And then Walmart, they're closing some stores in areas, and you hope that those areas are not rural, because in a rural area, a Walmart supports most of your needs, because the other opportunity would be what, like Amazon, but they don't deliver to everywhere. They've canvassed most of the United States, but and that's the other thing that I've been talking about. Grocery stores. Went into a grocery store maybe last week, and the prices are ridiculous. And, I had mentioned to you that I use Amazon Fresh. I'm in a suburban area outside of a large metropolis, so I can get my Amazon pretty quickly, and they deliver groceries. And I'll tell you what, this is terrible. The box of the Dove little mini bars, they're like bonbons. Oh my gosh. Can I tell you, $1.88 a box. I bought 5.
How much are they elsewhere? Like, those are kind of expensive, aren't they?
Very expensive. It's $6, $6.50 easily. And I'm like,
wow.
$1.88 a box? Yeah. So I've
Take
got
that all day.
until next year because I really don't eat ice cream very often. But it's not just that. It's, you can get eggs for $2. You can get milk for, what, like 2.50, under $3. Like those are the prices that I'm okay with. And those are normal prices. I take my happy ass into a grocery store and I'm like, what? You want how much for butter? Up to $6 a pound?
Yeah,
For
eggs are crazy expensive.
I'm like, forget it. I'll go get a chicken. I mean, this is crazy. And a lot of people are doing that. There's a lot more illegal chickens out there in backyards because people just aren't going to pay the prices, or we're making deals with the local guy that lives a little bit farther out than we do, and they sell produce and they sell eggs, and they've got farm fresh meats. And to your point, I haven't been eating as much meat, and I haven't been cooking as much meat for the kids.
Yeah, it's but a lot of people are going through that and just shopping down, and that's not good health wise too, because a lot of the stuff that's cheaper now is like all these processed foods, and I there's a lot of things about RFK Jr. I disagree with, but man, he is really spot on about like this pandemic in America of bad, unhealthy foods and unhealthy people. It's an epidemic that needs to be addressed, and it goes right back to like what the FDA approves to put on our shelves. That you that traveled overseas, that a lot of countries over there won't even put most of the foods that we buy here on their shelves
They
because
won't.
it's so processed.
Exactly. Or the preservatives are like, I just put some information out because I was talking to a girlfriend at the gym today, and we got into this conversation because she's at that age where she has gone into menopause. And she was literally getting off the phone with her doctor because they're sending her to a compound pharmacy to compound hormone replacement for her, specifically her. So, she has to replace that estrogen, but she also needs some progesterone and a little bit of testosterone. And those are very complex things that if you don't do that, as we know for women, your skin becomes dry, your hair is brittle, it'll fall out, it'll grow back in like that kinky, wavy old lady hair grows in. So we are hormonal creatures. But the one thing that I want to get back to about food is that soy right now is a preservative, and it's in everything. It's in your everyday bread, it's in your ice cream, it's in everything. Read your labels. And the reason why I get on my soapbox about soy is because when a man or a boy eats soy, it metabolizes as estrogen. And when a man has too much estrogen in their system, they begin to gain weight and they get slower, and you gain cortisol. And cortisol is what's in your ear like, oh, we need a cookie. I could really use a brownie right now. Oh, I want a bowl of ice cream, because it's hungry. That's what cortisol does. It just makes you more and more and more hungry. But it's going to cause low testosterone. And eventually, if we have these boys growing up with soy in all of their processed foods, you're not going to have the population that a country should have. So why does the FDA allow it?
Well, one has to wonder, because maybe there's something to that big ag and big pharma that RFK Jr. is talking so much about. I happen to think he's probably more right there. And I've heard this, I've kind of been onto this for like years. I've sort of known this. And the more you kind of go down that rabbit hole and research this, the more angry you would get. So yeah, I guess that's homework for anybody watching. If you want to go kind of look into this stuff, it's crazy how unhealthy everything is. I mean, it's not just like going through the drive-thru at McDonald's. It's like what you buy anywhere else.
Everything.
Why chemicals in there that cause cancer in foods? But they do.
They
right?
do.
So, yeah.
And our FDA approves it. It's like,
yeah.
What is the FDA for if they're not actually watching out for our health, and they're more in bed with the medical system and the insurance companies, and what are the kickbacks that they're getting? Because if you give us a food pyramid, like you and I grew up on the food pyramid, what was the very, very bottom, the largest portion of your day? Grains, wheat, that's flour, bread. You were supposed to eat that more than your fruits and vegetables. Well, what did that cause? It caused a society of obese people that are diabetic.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know this, but a slice of regular white bread has about 3 to 4 teaspoons of sugar per
Yeah.
slice. Now, if you eat a couple of sandwiches a day, that's 4 slices of bread. You just had 16 teaspoons of sugar. You might as well just start shoveling out of the bag, because that is exactly what you just ate. You know, this kind of, I guess people probably would wonder, like, you know, me being in the world of investments, there's so many big ag companies and big pharma companies that are out there, and you know, me working in investments and what I recommend to people and what I pick up for people. Why would I be thinking so much about this stuff? Because honestly, I don't know any other person that's in my field that like tries to go down this rabbit hole. They just look at bottom lines and numbers and things like that. But I'll tell you something that's really always sort of weighed on me. It's like, you know, if you want to do what's right by people, you have to have a conscience, right? So I would like to know ahead of time what some of these companies may be doing wrong, because, you know, if people wake up next year or 2 years down the road and think, all right, I'm just going back to local and we're going to start shifting our production locally. And you start seeing that, because there's that, you know, that switch to local, everything local buying that's been, you know, preached about for years. And I'm glad we see more, a little bit more of it, but it's sort of plateaued at some point because everybody still goes to big box stores and Amazon. But I would hate to have somebody in some pharma company that I know most people didn't trust, and 2 or 3 years from now we find out that they were doing something shady as can be, or a big ag company, and all of a sudden nobody wants their products because we're sort of waking up to, you know, about truly being rich is means partly being healthy, you know, and if you know people wake up to something like that, I would certainly hate to have 25% of somebody's portfolio in these companies because they paid a pretty good dividend, and then watch it go to nothing
Right.
because I didn't, because I was too afraid to look into the, go down the rabbit hole. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would hate to be that guy. That's somebody worked their butt off for that money, and I don't
Mhm.
want to. So there's a reason why my investment strategy sometimes stays away from companies like that, and I look for other things. Um, so yeah, there's that. But yeah, some of the data that's out there is saying, you know, Wall Street may be still trading near an all-time high in the indexes, but there's something on Main Street that's not right, that people know, people feel, and I think that's going to play into the election. And you know, just one of the things I'll point out is, like, as we see job losses, especially if you're in an urban area, you know, near where you're at, you know, people that work in, you know, factories or manufacturing, things like that, or even white collar stuff. You know, if you know people that are getting laid off from their jobs or companies that are closing, I want people to think very long and hard about whether they want to leave their 401k where it's at.
Mhm.
It may be, it may be cost effective to leave it alone. You might have good investments that you've already chosen in there, and it's okay. But you know, there's a lot to be said for taking that under your own control and having it in your own account. And maybe it's cheaper to do that in your own account. You have to compare the costs,
Mhm.
and then what's available for you if you left that particular, you know, rolled that over to an IRA or something like that. So, folks, if you're going through anything like that, or if you've been laid off, make sure you talk to your advisor about whether it's best to take that with you instead of leaving it where it's at. Like, I can't stress that enough, because I know so many people who have forgotten where they had a 401k, even if it's smaller stuff like 5, 6, 7,000, because there's over $20 billion of lost 401k money out there right now. Over 20 billion with a B of money sitting somewhere that, like, you can't find your old 401k now. That's lost money to people. So don't be those people. You know, keep track with it. So if you have an advisor, call them. If you know, if you or call me and let's look at it and see if it's cost effective to stay where you're at or do something else.
And with that said, what is the best way to contact you? Is it jc@vistafrontpartners.com?
Yeah, drop me an email. If you go to vistafrontpartners.com, there's a contact us page there. You can leave a note there, say, hey, give me a call. Here's my contact info, and I will get up with you ASAP. And my phone number is on the website there too. So you're welcome to call. If you don't get me right away, just leave a message and I'll get back with you as quick as I can.
Okay, and that phone number is 859-750-5881. All right, so we have about 5 more minutes left, but I do want to talk about international investing. So this sort of goes back to what we were saying about when our politics is shaky and we have a country that's very divided and don't know which way it's going to go, but each candidate has a specific plan that is very different from the other. It seems to be international shaky. Is that the same thing with investing internationally?
Well, you know how like we have a disconnect between Main Street and Wall Street here?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing with a lot of places in the world. So some places you have very mature markets like European markets, China to some degree, Australia, Japan. So you have very mature markets. And then there are other markets that are still developing and growing. And there's a lot of opportunity in those for faster growth. So the reason I always talk to people about having some international investment if you're a long-term investor and you have you want to have a more well-rounded portfolio, you can invest in either individual stocks or mutual funds that are international or global. Like you'll hear like both phrases. A global fund would be something that's covers every sector, every part of the globe. So you'd have U.S. companies in there, probably a good chunk of them. 25, 35%, 40% sometimes top heavy. And then you would probably have another 20% in Europe, like UK and France and Germany. And then you'd have some in Japan, some in Australia, and then some in like these smaller emerging markets, like some in Africa, some in Asia, some in South America, for example. So it's a good idea to have any well-rounded portfolio to have some international investing. There are some funds that will be more region specific. So you might find some that are in Asia. That'll include countries like India, where a lot of companies, U.S. companies that are multinationals, which are global, right? So those are global companies too, but they're moving out of their production facilities out of China and going back to India and other parts of Southeast Asia. So you can get funds that mutual funds that'll focus on companies in those regions. Some that'll focus in just Europe and some of the Baltics. Some in Latin America. So it's a interesting mix of what you can put in there. So just like an investing 101, there's some things you need to look at, like access to growth opportunities for these funds, some of the things that are in the funds, valuation opportunities. So some countries based on currency valuations and diversification, for example, might be a more value than another sector, another portion of the world, right? So you have to take some of those things into consideration. And when people say like international companies and non-US, you can buy some of them individually if you don't want to buy mutual funds I like the funds portion because you have a lot of diversification in them. But you hear a lot of companies that are foreign companies that trade on our exchange. And those are called ADRs, or American Depository Receipts. You heard of the pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca?
Mm-hmm.
So they're one of them. Toyota, that's a Japanese company, but they trade on our exchange too because they go through like big bellwether banks to, set up for the exchanges. The shares can trade here.
Mm-hmm.
Sony Group is another. So you can buy a lot of individual companies, but you always take a risk with some of those individual companies. If you get something that's Chinese companies, and are you always sure what the numbers are going to be, like the sales numbers and things like that coming out of China, because they always inflate their numbers and their growth. So that kind of gives you pause on some of those companies there. It's why I like funds, because somebody may like Alibaba, for example, which is kind of like China's version of Amazon,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't want to buy it individually, but they might find it that's only like 3 or 4% a mutual fund. So they'll own it, but just a very small portion of the fund overall. So And another big one, Taiwan Semiconductors. That's been in our national defense discussions and AI. So everybody's afraid China might go take Taiwan, and we definitely don't want them getting a hold of the data at Taiwan Semiconductors, which is why they're move their factories back to the U.S. So but it takes a while to set those chips, the production of those chips up, because it's a very complicated thing. So there are a lot of foreign companies that you can buy on our exchanges, but just be careful as you evaluate about what kind of numbers you're getting out of those countries, whether that actually jives with the numbers that the companies themselves are reporting. The good thing about our exchanges, we have a lot of rules and regulations, so they have to report some things, all right? So they can't be non-transparent like they can in other places, but you have to be careful about what they're reporting as to how accurate it is at the same time. So that being said, that, investing 101, consider some international investing as a part of your overall strategy. Right now, probably not a big part because the dollar is so strong, but you want to look at emerging markets and get some like rocket fuel for growth on some of those. You can find funds that are specific to those regions. And if anybody is interested in maybe like learning how to research those, if you're looking at a few of them, I'll be glad to, if anybody wanted to call and chat with me, I'll kind of, we'll open the hood and see what's underneath it and kind of show you a handful of things to look at in those funds to determine whether you want them or not.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for that. I was just, sitting here looking at a couple of different things and the types of international markets. So developed markets and emerging markets. Obviously, there's more risk in the emerging markets, correct?
Right. But a lot more to gain.
Okay. All right.
So high risk, high reward, but again, high risk. So that has to be a part of your thought process as to how much you would want to put in that, or any, right?
Right.
Not that there's risk here in this country too, but in comparison, you can have that discussion about if that's something appropriate for you or not.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. So what are you working on this week before I let you go? Tell us.
What am I working on? I'm just going to be following some investment reports from some of the companies that I hold in portfolios for clients that still have a little bit of reporting to do, and just kind of being available for anybody that needs to talk. I'm going to be on the road this week too. I'm heading back to my office up in Frankfurt, so I'll be going up there about midweek, and then off to Cincinnati for a couple of days, and back here for Labor Day. I guess for Monday next week. I should be back Monday evening. So, but just kind of getting away for a couple of days while in the midst of the week.
So I've heard that you share some articles and videos on investing and things like that. Is that on LinkedIn? Is that on Facebook? How can we follow you there?
Yeah, LinkedIn. Just look for me over there, JC Schweingruber on LinkedIn, and on Facebook. Yeah, if I post an article up, sometimes I'll link it over to my Facebook page. I'll put the link there for people to follow, or to read. So occasionally I'll put something up, and I may write something. I don't know if before I leave or not, but maybe a little something on international investing. Just a small piece to put up for consideration for folks. So, but yeah, definitely follow there because I put quite a few articles up in the past on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time tonight. I hope that we can do this again soon. You've always been a wealth of information, and tonight is another night where you have taken the moment to feed us, to educate us, to give us some insight of what's going on, because quite honestly, if this isn't what you do day in, day out and follow the markets and follow the trends, it can be a little hairy for the rest of us to try to get an overview. It seems like that's not the easiest thing to do. So I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here to help anybody that needs. So thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And thanks everybody for watching.
Of course. I hope you have a good night. We'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for staying tuned and watching. I've seen all of you popping in, and it's just absolutely wonderful. As always, we are blessed. You are blessed. Mwah. I love you. And I'll see you for another great show coming up next.